as we will be focusing on redefining HR in technology sector, but more specifically the strategy for talent retention in hyper-competitive digital world. It is quite a mouthful, but it's also one of the most important conversations in business today. To get us started, to introduce myself, my name is Chantal van der Westhuizen. I'm a Managing Executive at Regenesis Corporate Education. I'm delighted to be facilitating today's 90-minute session. I'm looking forward to a dynamic exchange of ideas and insights. So just setting the scene, the information and communication technology sector sits right at the center of global digital economy. It drives innovation, transformation, and competitiveness, but at the same pace of change that fuels progress also creates enormous human capital challenges. Challenges include skill shortages, global competition for talent, shifting workforce expectation, and an ever-evolving workplace model. That means war for talent has never been fiercer. And in the war for talent, just what I've heard recently, talent has won the war. Okay, so employees are looking for more than just a paycheck. They want meaningful work, growth opportunities, flexibility, and cultures that value inclusion, well-being, and authenticity. So for HR leaders in tech, the key question isn't if we need to change, it's how fast we can adapt to keep our best people and create environments where they can thrive. So our aim today is fourfold. Firstly, we would like to unpack the unique challenges and opportunities that HR faces in the ICT sector. Then we will explore innovative people-centered retention strategies. We will further share real-world insights from the experts today, actively shaping the future of work. And finally, to our listeners, offer practical takeaways that you can apply in your own organization. So you will see online that we are joined by 7 outstanding HR leaders representing diverse sectors, each bringing deep expertise and unique perspectives. They will be introducing themselves and giving a quick overview as to where they're from and a little bit of a summary of their background so that you can get to know a bit more about them as we move along. All right, so I'm going to kick off with the first question. Panel members, this is an open debate, so you're welcome to raise your hands if you feel this question is for you, and we will build on that. We will have a Q&A section right at the end of the panel discussion, which I will facilitate. And then I will close off with just a summary of what I've heard and some key takeouts from the session. All right, the first question is, if we look at our talent landscape, what unique challenges do organizations face in attracting and retaining that top talent compared to the digital industries? Because we do know that people gravitate towards those digital industries. So what are the challenges that we face as organizations in attracting and retaining that top talent? Yes. Welcome.
Thank you for that. Fundo Vilagazi, lovely to be in this specific engagement. I currently with the Disc Pharmacies, and I look after people and culture. And thank you for posing that question. I think inevitably you're very correct. The talent in itself has won the race or the war itself. And there's vastly different challenges that we find, especially now in a space of a generation that is continuously evolved and has excessively evolved, thinking about the talent that we're currently needing to attract in the businesses. I think for me, some of the challenges that I've particularly seen is the lack of accessibility from a digital lens. I mean, if you think about South Africa in itself as context and largely spread across the country, it is the bottlenecks that we find in terms of engaging or finding talent in our far-reaching areas that predominantly might carry the skill or harness the skills that we actually require. Those, for me, are somewhat of the barriers that we are finding. And also the challenges that businesses find in the lack of skill sets as well that actually exist in order to match the roles that are required in a specific function or in a specific business. Not to say that these challenges are unmitigatable in a way. I think when businesses are purposefully engaging in communities of practices or community impactful initiatives from the lens of ESG or sustainability, there are opportunities of being able to expand or reach the quality of the talent that we require, investing particularly at a secondary or a primary level, right? So that they're connected with the brand and ultimately then finding a way to repurpose them into the organization to close the loop. That would be my view.
Great, thank you so much for that, Fundo. Any other views on that particular question, the challenges that you face in your business? Okay, we'll go first and then over to Dr. Chisefo.
Thank you, Chantal. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm Liesl Skitter. I take care of industrial relations for the Life Healthcare Group. But I have worked in healthcare for 36 years in various ways, and I always say I do healthcare first and HR second. So this is a particularly interesting question, and I think we are going to have to become a little bit flexible from an HR perspective ourselves in terms of maybe flexible contracts. So people are going to change in the way they work. One person may not be appointed in a particular company. One person might have a specialized skill, and we would need to allow them to work over a large number of companies, and we would employ a particular skill. So flexible contracts, I think, is something we need to be innovative on. We might start recruiting for skills rather than qualifications. I think the old-fashioned qualification, and maybe this is not a good forum to have that view, the old-fashioned qualification for 4 years might not be the way into the future. All right, I'll give over to other people's opinions.
Thanks, Liesl. Very insightful there. And I guess what I'm hearing from you is sort of how do we build the talent for our continent as people move across companies? So that's a great suggestion. Dr. Marion, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. I must say, I just want to piggyback onto what Liesl said, because I do think that the issues around contracts and really other traditional ways in which we're doing things makes it incredibly hard sometimes for us to retain talent. And I think what we see in our context is really that retention of the talent. And I also think that if we, the value proposition and what we're putting out there, our benefits and how that's structured, and I head up well-being and benefits for the Afrocentric group, by the way. And so what we definitely see there is how we structure the well-being offerings. It is incredibly hard sometimes to create that bespoke approach. We definitely have 5 generations in that workplace. And a very generic approach is really not what it's where we need to be at this point in time. So I think we do quite active listening to those 5 generations and how we package well-being, but also generally how we package benefits. And I think that's definitely where we are challenged currently in terms of retaining the talent that we actually have. Maybe I'll stop there. Thanks.
Right, thank you very much. Dr.
Moeletsi.
Yes. All
right, hi. Yeah, I think Tseho is easier, probably. I'm Tseho Moeletsi. I'm a pathologist. I have about 20 odd years in medicine. And I actually got co-opted into the people management side of things simply because as I worked as an area path in the periphery, I actually realized, in fact, that most of our competition can have similar analyzers, but what differentiates, the different offerings is the people within those organizations, and that's how I ended up in human capital. So, and just to reiterate on what the 2 previous speakers have said, in that traditional way of attracting and retaining will have to change, and flexibility and agility as the operating words for everything we would be doing in HR, in fact, would become the order of the day. And also the way we, in fact, have been functioning within our businesses will also have to change, where a more business partnership model would have, in fact, to take effect, where looking at business priorities and the skills that the business would be needing in order for success attainment would actually determine how we then get talent in and keep that talent within our organizations. Also, just to piggyback on what Dr. Marian said about having to change the generic way of, in fact, employee propositioning to a more bespoke or personalized type of, value proposition for those employees, because we indeed are competing for very scarce skills. But not only that, people need to see a career path well before joining organizations, and those career paths need to speak to the various generations, especially the generation that would be more predominant in the future. So it is imperative that HR people understand, in fact, those dynamics, and not only that, and in fact be able to map out where those skills exist within the various talent sources that they have within the organizations, and how to ensure continuous pipelines, in fact, in order to ensure sustainability of those capabilities within organizations. I think I'll leave it there.
Wonderful, thank you. I don't know whose hands were up first. I'm going from left to right on my screen. Rendani, over to you.
Thank you and afternoon. So my name is Rendani. I am from Right to Care. I'm the head of HR. So we focus mainly in health sector. So I just want to add one few points, because colleagues have said a lot. So issue of partnership and collaboration with university can play a bigger role in terms of how we refine and how to attract these talents that we have, and we build from there above. So that would be my only one input further to that, whatever colleagues have raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Trishini.
Good afternoon, Chantal. I think we can stick to Pritesh. So my name is Pritesh Mudli, and I'm the HR director for BioMedio Africa. I've been in the healthcare and biotech industry for just over 20 years. And my key passion is definitely in talent or in leadership capabilities across Africa. So for us in BioMedio, especially in the biotech sector, one of the key things we've done to attract talent and retain them is by really launching very diverse internship programs. So really getting out to the youth, where we want to explore the talent that they have, bring them on board with us, and really grow, mentor, and upskill their capabilities into the different talents that we need for today. So we've taken a slightly different approach in saying that if we don't find the talent, let's create the talent. Let's go out there and look for people that have a purpose that matches what our company wants to do, and then link the two. In South Africa, we've been pretty successful with our Ukukula program that we've run out, where we've had quite a few interns that have grown successively and are now today international. So we've really been able to attract and retain them with the growth and development.
Wonderful. Thank you
Thank
for that.
you.
Thank you. Ronaldo.
Thank you so much, Chantal, and thank you for this opportunity. Good day, everybody. I'm Ronaldo Campbell. I'm currently working for Centric Health as a knowledge and learning manager, specifically in the MedScheme entity. I've been with the company for about 14 years, and I do hold an MBA from the University of Johannesburg. And my passion really lies in creating learning environments, not only to build skill, but also to inspire growth, innovation, and I would say collaboration as well. Just based on your question, I think I just want to go back to what Liesl said in terms of qualification versus skill. And we do find that in many organizations we find that in employers mainly have adopted the philosophy that hire for attitude and train for skill. And I think it's important to understand that that is mainly dependent on the level of the role that you're employing for. But it's very important to have a balance between skill, attitude, as well as qualifications. Things like, I would say, pharmacy or a pharmacist or or surgery or critical care. You know, in those type of environments, you can't just hire for attitude, you really need to hire for skill. And there's a lot of nuances that really increases around that specific topic. So it's really just to make sure that you do have a balance in that regard. But I think in terms of the retention, I would say that, you know, to attract and really to retain talent, we need to ensure that we create a learning culture, you know, that really values curiosity over credentials. You know, people in today's day and age, like Dr. Marian said, is that we have, you know, all of the workplaces are, you know, general. They are diverse in terms of different generations that has actually joined the organization, and people are looking for environments where they can learn across domains. We really need to understand that retaining people, I would say, it's no longer about perks. It would really be about giving people the space and the support to continue to just reinvent themselves. And I think that's very important in the way of work today.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And thanks to everyone for answering this particular question, because it leads to another few questions that I wanted to speak about based on what you said. The conversation came out a few times around EVP, employee value proposition. So if we build a resilient, high-performing team or individuals, how do companies design those EVPs that go beyond the pay and the perks, as you just said, Renato? What does that EVP strategy look like for organizations in the retention and attraction? Dr. Marian.
Yeah, Chantal, maybe I'll give it a shot, and I am going to speak a little bit from a well-being perspective once again, given that that's my area of expertise. I know that an EVP is a lot more than that in actual fact, but I think I think panel members can speak about culture and all of that. But I do think that a very important part of that strategy is really your well-being strategy. I think, you know, the one good thing that COVID did, it didn't do much good, but the one good thing that it did do was to reposition well-being, workplace wellness programs in a very, very different way. I mean, that it took that pandemic actually just humbled corporates. You know, we were pursuing the bottom line and profits and all of that. And it took a health crisis to humble really corporates as far as I'm concerned. And I like using that word because we suddenly had to look at things differently. And one of the things we had to look at sharply was 100% the well-being of employees, because after all, what are corporates without employees? And subsequent to that, I'm afraid I think we've lost some of those lessons around compassionate leadership and all of the different ways we've had to look at things. But for me, a big part of that EVP, that value proposition, is definitely your well-being program. Again, I'm going to reiterate, looking at your generational blend in the organization. It can't be generic. It's got to be very bespoke to the different segments within the population. It's listening to what people say. It's trying to understand what their needs are. Our organization is 78% female, 58% male, 20% female. It's looking at those demographics. It's understanding the distinct risks and then packaging that in a way that's going to set your company ahead of other things. People today, I mean, our generation, they're not going to be they're not going to be concerned about certain things, but what they are concerned about is their well-being, it's their lifestyle. They will leave an organization in order to pursue a career somewhere else where they know that actually their well-being is being tackled and looked at very, very seriously. So maybe I'll just stop at that. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Dr. Cheho.
Yes, thanks, Chantal. We actually approach employee value proposition from various aspects, but I'll just touch on the three theories that we actually approach it from. We look at it from the social exchange theory, which says that if people perceive organizations as supportive, that in fact influence their motivation, engagement, as well as their innovative behavior. And from a human capital theory, where if people are feeling valued, either through education, development, health, this enhances their productivity and contribution within organization. And the third arm is actually adding enabling resources, right, that actually ensure that the interaction between the social as well as the human capital aspect, in fact, are supported through using digital means that allow flexibility and, in fact, more customization to what, in fact, or how employees can contribute. Also, this, in fact, sets the scene because it actually puts employee health or wellness at the center stage, not as a byproduct for how organizations operate. And it actually ensures that we embed human wellness in the day-to-day activities of organization that hopefully can actually appeal to employees, adding value in terms of business achievement or business success. So those theories usually how we approach it from our perspective. So I'll leave it there because there's quite a bit that one can add, and it is important that organizations communicate that very clearly and in their day-to-day functioning from the minute they in fact advertise all the way through the life journey of that employee. That EVP is clearly seen and communicated, so people aren't confused as to what's in for them when they in fact going to be entertaining your organization.
Right, thank you so much, Dr. Liesel.
I'm always one with a bit of an off-the-wall comment. And as I'm responsible for discipline, I would like to suggest that the one element that's always absent, if you look at an EVP, where a company presents their EVP, nobody ever talks about discipline. However, I believe that positive discipline is a potential addition to the EVP that is essential. I mean, I find myself in the middle of Einstein's madness formula, where we keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. We are very precious about policies and procedures, and for good reason in healthcare. But if we really look at the trends, I would suggest that it's probably a good idea to have a look at why nurses specifically, or healthcare clinical workers, are failing to follow a particular policy or procedure. And if you agree that it's not an ethical dilemma, maybe there's a reason why there's workarounds being done and hidden. And I think people would be very happy to work in an environment where discipline is seen as an opportunity for change and inspiration rather than just a punitive act. I can elaborate for many hours, but I think that I'll suffice.
Thanks, Liesel. Nice view on that. Nafundo.
Thanks for that. I think, sure, I'm gonna kind of steal or take components from what Liesel landed right now in Dr. Marion. And on the notion of employee well-being and health or safety in itself. For me, outside of when you talk about retention, I mean, we always land at a remuneration net of it. But there's a big role that a leadership team or a function plays into how employees are seen and how they are treated. So redefining the tone or the type of leaders that you need in order to lead these particular individuals or the sector itself, for me, is quite sound and important. And the absence of that largely, places any organization at a risk in terms of losing the talent that is required and needed. And the culture, the communities that you create in your organization also become quite important. The experience of the individual, are they allowed to how they are allowed to show up? Are they seeing, is there value that they are seeing from the contributions that they are actually making? And I think the last point that I would land on that is, I think organizations can play a bigger role or a better role in terms of being a bit much more clearer in the offerings that they present in terms of how people can grow in that particular organization or in that particular industry. So making sure that there are clear pathways of growth from where the person is into their next. It might look like a normal functional growth, or it might be a pathway that one takes in terms of specialized or a leadership pathway. Making sure that that is visible, because with the caliber of individuals, whether it's nurses, whether it's doctors, for an example, people want to know what their needs look like, and can the business enable that, and what are the resources that are available to what Renato mentioned earlier on, from a learning lens, what is available for me to grow and move to my next, ultimately, than any other organization that can provide me that position. So for me, the culture in your organization, the leadership tone that you're delivering, and visibility of growth are quite important in terms of retaining these individuals.
Right. Thank you so much, Mfundo. I've got Renato.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chantal. I think from my side, I should just like to stab at it. And from my side, it will really be based on from a learning and development perspective. When it comes to EVPs, really, it has become a powerful tool. Not just for attracting talent, but I would say for retaining, engaging, and just growing employees in a meaningful way. And what I do find is that, the modern EVP framework that's currently being used within the organization you're in, it's really increasing in terms of if we need to position it with regards to career development and continuous improvement or continuous learning, as the central pillars that we, that they're looking for. Because we've, Dr. Marion mentioned it, if we take COVID, after COVID, our way of work has changed exponentially. People don't work the same way that they've worked, and people would really like to gain new skills as they move along. As we see that, some of the challenges that we might experience, in the next 5 years that leaders might experience, especially in the healthcare industry, would be really around technology, or rather say AI and technology ethics. And that's making sure that the innovations that's coming in is there to serve the people and not to replace the people. And people always ask this question, will I grow here within this organization? And a few weeks ago, I actually read an article on LinkedIn which said that 94% of employees say that they would stay longer at a company that invest in their learning and the development. So it's really important as to, what does your EVP look like in terms of, learning and growth for your staff in order to retain them as well. Do they have clear learning pathways, that is aligned to their job roles, to the future opportunities? Do we have AI-driven platforms available that is really, that is tailored, that, to link back to their individual goals? Is learning really embedded in the culture, or is it just a perk? Because employees who feel invested in are more likely to stay.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to hand over to Preeti now.
Perfect. Thanks, Chantal. So, Ronaldo, I just wanted to get onto what you said earlier on. For us at BioMedu, we've really looked at our core values as part of our key EVP. And if you look at our core values, it's belong, dare, impact. So when you look under belong, we put ourselves out as science meets humanity. People first culture. Super important for us to create an environment of inclusion for everyone. Then we look at dare, where we start to look at things like growth, as we've shared, having good career paths, having an ability for a person to build their capabilities and grow, but also dare to innovate, dare to go out of the box, and dare to speak up and do something completely different without any fear in that sense. We want our team ready to lead change and not to be scared by change at all. And the last one, which is impact, comes in quite important, because this is where we get an opportunity to recognize our team, to address what they are doing, to work on their well-being, because without that well-being, we're not able to put everybody together as it is. So really playing a huge part in that, because at the end, if you look at the biotech industry, we say we change lives. And it's so important for us that our values link up to our EVP, where our people can understand how they play a part of this purpose and this mission for Africa.
Right, thank you very much. Rindani?
Thank you. So mine will also touch base on what Dr. Malone said and then Renato. One issue of mental health currently is quite a real issue since the time of COVID, when many organizations started to create an issue of hybrid system, right? And we have seen that many organizations now are working under hybrid processes or systems, whereby we sometimes forget about to check in with our staff members, how they are doing in terms of their well-being. Are they having good physical well-being while they are working from home? Are we checking on them in terms of their workload and the types and the likes? So I think it's high time during this changing environment, whereby in the next 5 years we're talking about AI space. How are we going to create that, retain that HR element, or human resource element, to say we are dealing with human beings, not machines? How do we then create a conducive environment while we're working remotely, and ensure that we still have human touch and human element through this environment? So I'll pause there. Thanks.
Thank you, Rendani. Dr. Marion, is that a new hand?
Oh, apologies. No.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask a question that I do not have on my script based on the conversation we're having. I've got 25 years corporate experience, and something that I grappled with very much in the L&D space and also in the HR space is when it comes to EVP or everything else that we've been talking about, where does personalization come in, especially if you've got an organization of 17,000 people? How do you personalize solutions? Do you build prototypes for various people or personality traits of people? What would you say is the thinking around personalization of solutions before we get into the actual AI conversation? Yes, Liesl.
Can I suggest that rules and regulations are probably the biggest barrier to that? But we hold those dear, so we have to find a way around it. And if I can reminisce about COVID, as my colleagues before, it was probably the most incredible time in terms of how people found solutions. There were no rules, there were no protocols, but people got together and they found a way. They collaborated in a way that is not possible if all the rules and structures are in place. And I think for HR, the challenge is to recreate that environment where people can truly bring themselves and work together with people that is to solve specific problems in specific ways. And then we find a way of making sure that that fits within the boundaries of the regulations that we have to adhere to.
Or the policies and processes that binds us often for large organizations. Okay, great. Preeti, I'm going back to you.
Perfect, thanks. So one of the key things we've realized is a lot of the times when you speak to employees about their career and where they want to go, they're not always certain. They tend to follow the general trends or basically a mentor that they've had or someone that they look up to, and that's the way that they want to go. What we've introduced is career development talks, where we've actually started to coach and mentor employees for them to understand just because, for example, I'm in finance doesn't mean I could be an amazingly great GM or VP, you know? So sitting down with them and understanding what are your strengths and then how can we help you to identify routes and areas that you could go into and you can branch into. Because ideally we want to retain the talent. So we want to make sure the person is with us because that's the person that drives our purpose. So, you know, working with each person to understand where's your talent, where's your interest, what lights the fire, what ignites the fire in you, and how do we get you there? So building those individual plans, like you say, for those people that has meaning. And it's not just a tick list or not part of a policy, as my colleagues have said. It's really something that they own, which is super important.
Mm. And again, I just want to build on that because, again, it's my own curiosity question. Leadership plays a key role in that as well. It's not only HR's function and role to develop and build the etc. to be played, but leadership role in conversation. So thank you for that. And then Mfundo.
Chantal, I missed you. I don't know if it was on my line. Just come back again with that comment.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I said leadership is a key role to play also. Prioritization of what's important for each one of the employees. I do think leaders need to understand their people, what makes them tick, what's important to them. And personally, one of my leadership traits is you don't lead everybody in the same way. And I think that's where the flexibility comes in also. And you will know, if you understand your employees, what's important to them and what you could put in place from an HR perspective to accommodate them. All right. Did that help, Mfundo?
Yeah. I mean, spot on. Well said.
Thank you. Renato, before I get to you, I see Dr. Shekho has already had her hand up. So, Doctor, over to you.
Okay. No, thanks, Chantal. Just to go back to the initial comment you made about personalization, right? I think it's very important to understand that where we begin a thing doesn't have to be where a thing ends. So in situations where there's absolutely no personalization or bespoke sort of offerings, one can start with a varied way that may appeal at the different levels or for the different functions or skills, and then slowly tailor it depending on what the data tells us. And we know we live in a day of where data is a huge commodity, even much more priced than gold or any other resource, in fact. So it's important for us to, in fact, leverage that. So use the information or insights given by data to help us decide on what, in fact, initiatives one can put in place. And that data isn't static, and you shouldn't make it too static. You need to actually be allow it to be a little bit more dynamic. So use it listening and using that data, the insights you get from it, to try and decide on how to design what may work in various levels or in various roles. It's actually quite important. But also collaborative functioning is quite important. So gone are the days where only when you are in recruitment, all you do is focus on recruitment, for example. And also, if you're an HR person, you only function within an HR space. So we are moving more towards cross-functioning and cross-collaborations, where people sitting in various roles can also help us determine how to structure things that, in fact, appeal and are more, in fact, responsive to what we are trying to get to, including our employees. So that cross collaboration doesn't only speak to management levels or senior leadership, it actually goes all the way across the board, so that we actually co-create what actually might work for various problems that we are in fact trying to solve. Also, I like what I think it's Nomfundo spoke about in terms of the leadership. And someone else, I think it's Prashni, who spoke about the environment within which we work, which is too regulated and too, in fact, inflexible. So we do need to create, with guardrails, of course, because of the environment within which we operate, safe spaces where experimentation can happen. And that experimentation even includes how to design various, bespoke or whatever other innovative ways of responding to whatever the business needs may be. So put guardrails in, get people to collaborate, use the data and insights from that data, get everyone to give input so you can co-create what might work. What is important is to understand that your start will not necessarily be your end, just be adaptive enough to be able to change or amend what needs amending.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tenko. You have taken me full loop to the very last question that I'm going to ask about our role as HR when it comes to technology and data, but I will get to that a bit later. So, Renato, your question and or answer, and then Dr. Marion.
Yeah, I think everybody's contribution has been exceptional in terms of really tapping into different areas to the specific question. But I find that creating a space for personalized career growth, especially if we look at large organizations, and looking at employees that has been employed there for so many years, I would say that it really requires a shift in just the standardized development paths that we normally have, that we do have available within the organizations. I think it would really be, it really involves fostering just a culture of continuous dialogue. Within our organization, we specifically use a framework like the T-GROW methodology. And that is something to really guide reflective career conversations, offering flexibility, evolving pathways that really align with an individual's aspiration in life stages. And those are conversations that takes place on a one-on-one basis between leaders and staff reporting into their area. So, so if we integrate these adaptive learning platforms, we are able to recognize knowledge, we are able to, reinvent maybe, for example, certain roles, and really just to empower and shape staff, for the next level, for the next chapter. So yeah, that would be my contribution to that.
Right, thank you so much, Renato. Okay, Dr. Marion.
Thank you. I think, I want to take this conversation, I know we tackled it from a number of different areas, to a very basic level in terms of personalization. And that is, how much psychological safety do we actually create in organizations to have these conversations? And when we use, it's like a buzzword, and we always think, oh, we've got to do these big things, to create all of this. But it's pretty basic. What are we doing to ensure that employees really, do we know our employees? Do they come to work with their full self? Are they ensured that they can just be authentic, that the conversations they're actually having, that Renato's referencing, are the real conversations they want to have, because leadership has created that psychologically safe space. And that's pretty basic, because it's in the everyday practices. It's not the big campaigns we run. It's not the huge posters and things and all of that. It's literally the day-to-day management practices and leadership practices that we encourage in workplaces. And I think that's where some of the problems may be rooted. And I think that already is where personalization starts. Do I know that Renato, for example, if he's working with me, his style is a little bit different. He's going to be thinking, if I'm asking something, a little bit more about something, and he likes putting something on email, while Liesl will immediately have a response. Do we take that into account when we're looking at these various things? So I suppose it sounds pretty basic, but I think it is really, really important when we are tackling this difficult topic of personalization. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Dr. Marion. And again, circling back to leadership and knowing your people and understanding them, and back to the basics to sort of say, I can tailor and personalize things without HR in the room, actually, but just understanding my employee. All right, so we spoke about well-being, we spoke about EVP and a lot to do, and EVP is a big bucket. But I want to come back to learning and development, something that's very close to my heart. So the question that I want to ask is, the rapid shifts in AI, cybersecurity, cloud technologies, what role do each one of you play as HR practitioners in continuous reskilling to keep talent future ready and engaged? But then I want to throw in a caveat there. It's a naughty question, but are our traditional learning models still effective? Do we need an entirely new approach to developing our people? Yes, Liesl.
I think we need a new approach. I think we need to look at how the hospitals are designed and how that needs to change, because the point of care used to be the hospital. So we designed hospitals based on the patient journey, whereas now the patient is going to be point of care. So the care delivery will have a journey, and that is going to significantly change the job content as well as the person specification of each job. And I think we need to envision the future and start preparing for how that is going to happen. I remember a time when we said nurses don't understand technology, they can't do email, they can't do a work computer. However, if you think about nursing, the micro learning that they get makes them work with the most sophisticated technology in the world. And they have not had any formal qualification. Micro learning, in my view, is the way to go.
Great, thank you so much. Rendani.
Thank you. So on this one, I also think that the issue of personalized learning, it needs to play a critical role. We need to use skills assessments to identify the gaps that are tailored on what we need, right? Digital upskilling, it's quite a thing to look at now. We need to ensure that people are having access to online courses, virtual labs, data analytics is the key issue that we need to look at as we move on. Mentorship and peer learning, right? We need to foster the knowledge of sharing through our peers and colleagues to ensure that we move to the right direction. Partnership with educational tech providers, because we are, as I said before, we are living in a space of AI world whereby AI is here and we must not be shy away to say we are living in an AI world. The issues of leadership development, we need to equip our managers to embrace the change, to support the upskilling of our current pool of talents that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Shego?
Right. I think it starts basically with us within HR. So if we fear a thing, it's very unlikely that we would actually be capable to support business and the people within that business to actually adopt certain things, technology, AI, whatever it may be. So it actually is quite imperative that us as HR people are actually capacitated in terms of the expertise required in order to actually support business. So it's important to build confidence in our teams as HR so they can go out there and support. But what is important in our field, because it's such a highly regulated field and everyone is talking about how technology will be replacing them, and there's a whole lot of fears that are coming within our staff in relation to this, what they call techno stress, or the fear of being obsolete, whatever you may call it. It's actually quite imperative that as HR we realize we need to empower our people by reskilling in order to take away some of those aspects. But a field like ours that is high pressured, where people are running and there's hardly any time, is to in fact emphasize how you partner technology with in fact people in order to free up time, so to give them an extra set of hands. And with this time saving, we should be using this time saving to skill or reskill or cross-skill the current employees in the skills of the future. And it's quite important, and that is for us to do, so that people aren't sitting around worried about whether I will be obsolete or I will be replaced, instead of actually seeing how they can pivot from doing this one mundane thing to something a little bit more that would actually even add value. So, and that hardly happens because we don't have safe spaces within our specific fields for this particular experimentation. So as HR, our job is to in fact support development and empower, take away the stress that employees have with regards to newer advancements, because they know they will be capacitated through that change. And not only that, we can't do it if ourselves aren't in fact capacitated to be able to provide that support and to actually emphasize why business needs to allocate the resources inclusive of time to doing this for their employees.
Thank you so much for that. So it is making that time, learning hours or whatever the case might be. Okay, Nafundo, over to you.
Thanks, Chantal. I think for me, the concept around reskilling is not only just, I would say, a skills issue. It's actually an engagement lever, if you think about it. I mean, it means that the engagement strategies can no longer only just rely on physical proximity for people to learn, to grow, or enable them to learn something new. I think engagement in itself must be tied to the capabilities that are needed in that specific organization or in the field, the confidence as well as the relevance of what is required at the time and the change that that organization is undertaking or the evolution thereof. I think also there are a couple of models that one needs to consider in these varying prospects. One, learning in the flow, learning in the flow of work. Diesel touched on it spot on, right? Learning in the flow of work, enabling micro-learning. Traditional models still require an individual to engage with an instructor in front of them, to sit in front of a computer, to rely on someone else being able to impart that information in their focus in it. Micro-learning for me is an adaptable model that I think balances all generations ultimately. And it allows people to engage or have time back to be able to engage in other aspects of that. The last model that I think is probably one to consider, probably elevate more, is the peer-to-peer and the social learning aspect of it. Also, the traditional models that have been driven only rely on e-learning based type of platforms that are driven on certain content being led by particular individuals. But if you pull learning experiences like YouTube, if you pull in specific other platforms that everybody engages on, podcasts, things that the news, there's so many other social engagements that people can leverage new information on. I think businesses need to invest better in terms of learning tools and technologies so that people can learn in that flow of work on a daily basis, structured though in the right platforms that are actually.
Thank you, Nafunda. That's beautifully said. I've dubbed this quote saying learning in the flow of life, because you can sit in front of the TV and learn something new on Netflix or Google or whatever the case might be. So you learn every day. It doesn't have to be a formal program, and I think that's the mind change that we need to bring about when it comes to AI tools, etc. Saying it's not only sitting in a classroom being taught a new tool or whatever the case is. Experiment, work with it, play with it, let someone show you how to do it, etc. So, yeah, I like learning in the flow of work and life. Thank you. Preeti.
Thanks, Chantal. So I'm going to touch on a little bit what Dr. Sefu shared with AI, and I'm going to keep it super real, okay? When AI came out, I have to admit, I was super stressed out. What does this mean for me? Everything going digital. And it took my Gen Z daughter to share with me and to show me how to embrace AI instead of running from it. And I think this is the one thing we really try to get out to our business is AI doesn't replace the human in human resources. In fact, by utilizing it, we've been able to create better employee experiences, which now gives us more time to actually focus on what's important, and that's our people, you know? So from an AI perspective, I guess the key lesson for us in HRBP is how do we utilize it so that we can spend more time being the strategic business partner that our teams need, and being able to spend more time on learning and development, having those discussions with leaders, and putting things into place that can have a bigger impact for the business in growing faster within our industry.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Renata, are you agreeing with Preeti there, your view?
Yeah, no, I think Nomfundo has really summarized everything so beautifully. And also agreeing with Preeti in the sense that, before I did my MBA, I was in very same boat. Luckily, I had the opportunity to do my MBA in digital transformation. So that actually assisted me in really understanding, what does this AI world look like? And, how would that basically impact the workforce in the near future. And I think from my side, I think it's what is important to understand is that you asked earlier, do we need to use a new approach? And I find that, yes, we would have to do that. And then I think leaders today really need to adopt a human-centered approach to technology. That is very important. One that really blends innovation with empathy and with purpose, because that is where it fail. That is where it sometimes fail in terms of empathy, because the digital tools like our AI-driven learning platforms, we use things like simulation-based training, or personalized development, platforms that we have, and we should realize that that is really just there to enhance individual growth, and it's not there to streamline compliance. What is very important is that in doing so is that we will actually help, especially the healthcare professionals, allow them to remain engaged, future ready, and really align with the mission of compassion. And like I said earlier, some of the challenges that leaders might be experiencing within the next 5 years would be the AI and technology ethics, because people still have the notion that innovation coming in is going to replace what I do as an individual, and we have to create. Dr. Marion spoke about that, the psychological space. Or for staff to be able to voice how they feel, so they can understand that it is not there to replace you as an employee, but it's there to enhance what you are currently doing in order for you to be able to reskill on something new, because some of our tasks that we're currently doing is very mundane, very manual type of work, and the AI is there to support that in order to get that work done, so that you are able to focus on something else and to reskill into something new when it comes to AI within the world of work.
Great, thank you. Well put, Renato. Nafundo, is that an old hand or a new hand?
Old hands.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to finalize the conversation with 4 questions, and I'm starting from the outside in. I'm going to start around global, then I want to bring it back to leadership, the employee, and then human resources as such. So the question that I want to ask is really around, and Liesl, I'm dying to ask you this question because you've got your master's degree in international human resource management, but anybody can answer. How can HR in emerging markets balance the brain drain challenge while still fostering our local talent, growth, and competing with global tech giants?
I would suggest that employees are not as mobile as we seem to think they are. I think in the healthcare industry, certainly nurses can go more or less where they want to go, but I don't know that they would want to. So I think the answer is quite simple, is to make people want to be where they are. So all the conversation we've had around EVP, how we treat people, the environment, whether we allow people to actually bring themselves, I think that is the answer. I don't think it's a difficult answer. And if I think about the psychological safety aspect and what leadership can do, is for us to, I think we get diversity wrong. I think diversity appreciation is not about the color of your skin or your sexual preference. I think it's about celebrating original thought. because really we are all just part of one entity, and we need to allow people to feel safe, to have an original thought, to say it without fear, and for people to appreciate and celebrate that. I mean, churning something that someone else has already said, we can leave that to AI.
Great, thanks for that, Liesl. Mfundo, your view on the brain drain?
So, I mean, Liesl's first point is still spot on and very much relevant in terms of each business organization that plays into the health space. We need to ensure that the value proposition is solid. We need to ensure that it's relevant and strong for the talent to grow and for them to be able to stay through. I think what the organization brands presents or what it's known for in terms of combating or tackling healthcare. I think also we need to anchor EVP in itself in the health impact that the very individuals actually play into, saving lives, building local health equity, and improving the quality of access. I think in our context, in our environment, we speak about how do we provide quality and accessible healthcare, not just to the few, but to the many. And in that self is we've anchored ourselves purposefully in that so that our healthcare workers can be connected to what we are trying to solve for in the market. I think the last piece, and I mean, we haven't tackled that as much, is from a REM lens. We know that we have a skills shortage or an issue when it comes to healthcare. So when we look at remuneration structures, where you're linking your STIs, your STIs or your LTIs or your share components, we should actually consider healthcare offering in that as well. Because through COVID, we've learned that we have a big risk. And ultimately, you know, when everybody else is asked to show up, we needed our nurses, we needed our doctors to show up in that. So we also need to consider remunerating accordingly when it comes to that particular sector.
Although we did say earlier on that's not the only thing that the people are working for is that paycheck at the end of the day any longer, but it is still an important lever to pull, is what I'm hearing you say. Thank you for that. Dr. Checho?
Thanks, Chantal. I think what we also sometimes in the healthcare sector we lose sight of is the question which I always have to remind my team of: who cares for the carers? Right? And sometimes it's because no one cares for the carers enough that the carers feel that they may have, in our setting, I suppose, better options elsewhere. So people don't want to leave unless they have to. I mean, if home is comfortable and it gives you what you need, the chances of you wanting, unless you really are an explorer and really that is what drives you, and that's fine. We do need people like that as well. But however, what we need to understand is that sometimes the data that informs why we actually have certain challenges is right there staring at us in the face. It's how we use that and leverage it. And then also what we need to remember is that for those who've already left, there's also information as to what attracted them elsewhere, right? And that can be used, in fact, and leveraged to try and gain some understanding so that we stop the drain. However, we should be open enough to also allow collaboration with the aim of skill transfer or information transfer, even with the remaining teams. So what tends to happen is the vilification of those that leave, and a complete cut-off in terms of conversation or information gathering that could be used as intel, or even continuing relationships that may still help us in order to upskill those that stay behind. But not only that, to have that additional resource out there in the world that could be tapped on from time to time in order to, in fact, ensure that there's continuous availability of that skill, even with newer teams coming up, even though that skill is no longer physically sitting within our midst. And I think we need to be flexible enough of course, with guardrails that ensure safety and not sharing company compromising information, but to continue relationship post leaving that may actually be beneficial to us and our business. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. All right. Anything else before I move on to the next question? Anybody else? Okay, now let's bring it back to our leaders. We are busy driving transformation here, and that is impossible without leadership buy-in. Now, how much leadership styles evolve in tech-driven companies? How do they evolve to meet the expectations of diverse, globally connected workforces? How must the styles evolve?
So, I missed you. You disappeared there for a while, Chantal.
Oh, sorry, apologies for that. Okay, am I back?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. My question is around leadership now. What change in style is required of our leaders to drive this transformational digital landscape in which we find ourselves? What do we want from our leaders?
I don't know if it's only from my side, but right, we were breaking up quite a lot, when you phrased that question. So I think maybe we just need to take another stab of it. I'm not sure if you can.
Now?
Chantal, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. I see, Liesel, you've got your hand up, and Dr. Marion, so I guess you got the crux of the question around what do we expect differently from our leaders driving this digital transformation agenda?
Yeah, I think leadership is quite a passion of mine, and I think leadership has changed significantly over time. But I think we're standing on the precipice of the most incredible shift in consciousness in humanity in all the history. And I think that places a really, really significant responsibility on anyone in a position of influence, because we are co-creating almost in real time the future, and it depends on how we show up and our energy. So leadership, in my mind, is about managing and cleaning your own energy and making sure that when you show up and as you influence the room and the people around you, you made some conscious choice around how you want to do that.
Great answer. Thank you, Liesel. Dr. Marion.
Yes, thanks. I just want to pick up on that. It really is about that. It really is about being quite intentional about where we want to see leadership going, and as Liesel is saying, that creation for the future. It's not about a leader who expects that people need to be in the room and present, and that's how they're going to manage them, through being present. It's about a leader who understands that you're managing hybrid workforce, you're managing remote workers. It's about a leader that will be quite intentional about reaching out to people and understanding that, well, people may be all over the world and not the geographical divide. So really being able to manage that. It's about a leader who's going to exercise compassion. It's about a leader who's actually going to understand that, and speaking about techno-stress, I think it was Dr. Sechel that said that, it's also about a leader that understands that there are times when people need to disconnect, because with all of the good things that comes along with this digital age, some of the bad things is that we do not disconnect. So it's about the leader who understands that. It's about a leader who's quite deliberate in understanding that in creating a culture, you really have to find new ways of managing hybrid workers and remote workers, and you have to find ways of connecting with people. Otherwise, we are really losing the aspect of a kind of culture that we're trying to create. And of course, my favorite topic, it's about a leader who is quite deliberate in creating that psychological safety for workspaces within this new reality that we are in at this point. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for that. I'm going to build on that on the next question, Dr. Marian. Nafundo?
I mean, I think Dr. Marian covered it, quite well. For me, in that we need leaders that are purpose-driven. We need leaders that are able to influence through empathy and understanding of the people that they're and there's a quote that I once read where it says that people don't get behind the system upgrade. They get behind a story that says this will save lives, bring care closer, and create dignity. I think for me, and I mean, we always underplay the purpose concept in itself and assume that it's about soft leadership. It's really not about that. It drives strategic influence, it builds alignment, it builds trust, and it plays very much on that notion of care that we know exists in the healthcare environment. What people need is a well-articulated leader who's purpose-driven in the way that the narrative that they share to their people shift the dynamic, less so from what is changing to why we're changing, why you need to form part of the change, and why you are the centerpiece of what we actually try to drive and what that North Star looks like. Because I think most people need clarity around what the future looks like. There's a prospect in it. So a leader must be purpose-driven and be able to then self-direct individuals in terms of where they want to go or need to go.
Wonderful. I really like that. Thank you for that. I'm going to hand over to Rendani now.
Thank you. So I've got, I think, 3 or 4 points in this one. So we need a leader that will have to invest in the digital literacy and data analytic skills. We need a leader that will have and develop agility in the workforce planning, because workforce planning is quite critical while you are having a plan for the future. We need a leader that need to be a strategic partnership beyond our normal traditional HR function. We need to move away from our traditional function of the way we do things. Number last from my side is that we need a leader that will have to promote a continuous culture of innovation and diversity in our current environment. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Rendani. Renato.
I think from my session, so I think the first thing that we need to understand as leaders is that you are no longer a leader when it comes to digital transformation. Your role has shifted. Your role shifts actually from being a leader to being an enabler. And that's the important thing to understand. Because your role now is to enable, your role is to empower and to inspire. And I think it's going to be very important for leaders to make sure that they create a clear vision for change. It's no longer about enforcing compliance within your space, but you need to have a safe space where you can have open dialogue with the staff in terms of understanding what is the vision, making sure that the obstacles, are removed that might be standing in their way. They really need to understand the whole purpose behind why this change is being implemented, because it is important for you, and for the team as a whole to really focus on building trust. You need to create a collaborative environment, and you really need to make sure that people have the tools to support the work that they're supposed to do. And I find that if in those instances, if you lead with openness, you have to listen actively, and you really must be willing to adapt, because that is what the job would be of a leader. It isn't just to manage the technology or the changes that's being implemented, but it's really to unlock the potential of people throughout. Because that's the important thing. It's in those moments where you actually see who is digitally savvy and who is not. And some people have much more potential than what they are able, what's forthcoming. And that's why it's important to create that type of an environment as an enabler and not as a leader. Thanks, Chantal. That's all from my side.
Thanks, Shanada. I really like that. And I think that puts a spin on leadership development also, because it's a different way of leading altogether. It's not the traditional stock standard leadership programs that we roll out. It is having leaders make the mindset change of being an enabler. So I really like that. Thank you. Dr. Tejo?
I think I like how everyone was so actually quite good in defining the characteristics of the leader of the future. It's actually quite beautiful. And with that said, I'd just like to say this. Because of what was so beautifully outlined, it is important to actually change now who we place in those leadership roles. The way we used to appoint leaders can't be the way we are going to continue to appoint leaders of the future. So I'll speak about my own environment. You can't simply put someone in a leadership role simply because they have great technical expertise within the team, right? It needs to be quite strategic and intentional who gets to lead. Because of what we clearly outline as important aspects of leadership of tomorrow. So if we are simply going to do what we are doing, if you are good at, I'll give a silly example in my if you're very good at actually testing and most of what you do is accurate, that doesn't necessarily mean in fact, you should be a manager in that specific lab. So we need to also create pathways where people can grow with technical expertise without necessarily being thrust into leadership roles simply because, you know, they are technically good. And once we change that, especially in the healthcare sector, we actually will start to see some of these things come across that will enable us to, in fact, achieve all these things we would like to achieve with the workforce of the future.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tejo. I think that's very valid. I'm an advocate for the leadership pipeline work and asking people, or we promote technically sound people without asking them two questions. The one is, do you want to lead people? And the second one is, are you equipped to lead people? And I think that's sort of where we fall flat. We take our best team leader or best salesperson and make them the manager. And I think that is where we need a change of mind. Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Marion.
I just wanted to contribute another point, perhaps because I do a lot of work in this space, and so I see some of the problems inherent in leadership. And for me, it is about that enabling role that Renato spoke about. Part of when we get challenged with change, that stress perhaps will detract from that enabling role. And what we often create are toxic environments. Part of the enabling role is to create an environment of dignity and respect for our employees. Because let me tell you, your employees will leave you. They're not going to stick around to be bullied, to be jostled, and all sorts of unfortunate behavior that we do see. So part of that enabling role, I think more and more is going to be about that creation of dignity and respect in workplaces. Thank you.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Namfundo, is that an old hand? Okay, great. All right, we're heading towards the end. I've got two more questions. We looked at the external environment with the brain drain happening. We looked at the role of leadership, and this was a beautiful conversation for me because I'm also extremely passionate about leadership. Now bringing it closer to the employee, and I think we've answered this question already, but let's just explore it for a minute. So with the hybrid and remote work becoming the norm, how can we as HR leaders create sustainable models to drive productivity while preventing burnout and disengagement? Although we're seeing more and more people return to the office also. So that's the flip side of it too. Liesel.
Well, I guess the answer is quite simple. I mean, we need to be flexible. We understand this. The world is changing significantly. So we might find a future where people work a lot less hours because of AI and technology taking over. a lot less hours, in a different way, doing something in over a large number of companies, working a lot more from home. Telemedicine and biotech is going to move the point of care to the patient. And very often, the person who's currently patient facing is going to change to working from home and interacting with patients who are at home, and facilitating care in that way. So I think there's significant changes just ahead of us, and I think that we have to be completely open as HR and not hold on to our normal rules and things that we used to believe in. So let's challenge everything that we have. The nature of contracts, the fact that someone has to work 8 hours and 5 days, we need to start challenging that already. And I believe in Europe they already are. The retirement age is changing. The number of days people work in a week is changing. We need to start embracing all of those innovative ideas as HR specific.
Right, thank you. Rethink.
I think for me, one of the key things is for our leaders to understand that the opposite of burnout is really connection. Creating that environment where people can feel safe, like Dr. Marian has shared, an environment where they can share what is distressing them. And as you said, being in hybrid models, we're not always there to be able to see firsthand what's happening with the person. So being equipped, being enabled leaders, as Renato said, being enabled to understand that it's about listening, right? It's about listening what the person's saying, where they're going, what they're doing, and being able to support them through this change. So I think for me, it's really important is to say, don't stop treating burnout as a negative. It's really about how we connect with people. It's a norm. It's something that happens every day. How do we help our teams to be better, to be able to understand how to manage their time and disconnect, as Dr. Marian said. Learn that at a certain point in time, disconnect is super important and one of the key priorities that we should all have as employees.
Right, thank you so much for that. Renato, you want to build on that?
I think I'm just very short from my side. I think, as you said, we've really moved into a much more of a hybrid workforce, and I think what is important would be building models that really enable flexibility. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for now. It's no longer the 9 to 5 that people would have to work, but how much work can actually get done within a specific amount of hours. It's about the value that you add as an employee and the results of the work that you are doing instead of the amounts of hours that you work. Dr. Marian, you can help me here. I know there's a word that you guys use. I know there's absenteeism, and I think there's is it presenteeism? If that is the word, because you can have someone that's working a 9 to 5, but they're actually absent. They're not adding any value. They have not done anything in those specific hours. But I think that just building models around flexibility for me would be quite key.
Great, thank you. That's great, Renato. And we've got time for one more comment. So, Dr. Checho, over to you.
Thank you. I think just to say one thing, sustainability, right? All companies, I'm guessing all representatives sitting around here wants to see their company still in operation 100 years from now. So if we don't ensure that the very assets, the people who in fact ensure that we can do what we do are taken care of, then I don't see how we are going to be sustainable into the future. So it's important that in whatever it is that we decide to do, either we creating flexible or adaptive ways of working or accommodating employees. What should sit front and center is the fact that we want those people that we're investing so much of what we spoke about in to be able to exist well beyond the little short term thing that we are trying to achieve, because we're investing so much into them so that our organization can continue to exist into the future. So whatever we do has to have compassion and sustainability at the core of it, and the human-centeredness at the core of it, because in as much as there's, we are using people, these people we are using to care for others, to save lives, as Prashni, I think, said, as the core of being here. And lives are not necessarily going to be saved by machines. And so that is why it's important that in as much as there's technological advancement and AI being introduced, the people that are going to be interfacing or collaborating with these also need to be reminded of their own sustainability for continuity to okay. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Doctor. All right, I'm going to draw the session to a close. My last question was going to be, how is your role transforming as an HR professional, given where we find ourselves? But I'll leave that up to you to ponder about. You might have the answers already. So just very quickly, takeaways from the session today is perhaps some closing thoughts that I want to leave with the audience is retention starts with belonging. We spoke about retention at the beginning. Culture isn't just what we say, it's how we make people feel every single day. Learning is the new loyalty. When employees see growth, they stay. Leadership matters. Empathy, adaptability, authenticity define great leaders in digital contexts. Technology cannot replace connection, is what we say. Data helps, but purpose keeps people, and well-being is strategic. Thriving people build thriving organizations. So I think those are the 5 things that stood out for me in our conversation this afternoon. I'd like to then just thank all the incredible panelists for your insight, your honesty, your expertise, and to our audience for joining us this afternoon for a meaningful conversation. There are no questions in the chat, so that saves us some time. So I just want to say, as HR professionals and leaders, our challenge is not only to respond to disruption, but to redefine how we attract, engage, and retain the human potential behind that digital transformation. So thank you once again. Until next time, let's continue shaping workplaces where people and performance truly thrive. Thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Chantal. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.